Welcome to the Authority File. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. For the next 4 episodes, my guests and I will be discussing a topic we've been hearing a lot about. What will the workplace look like and behave like in a post-COVID environment? The obvious catalyst here is working remotely, which has been a lifesaver for some and an enormous challenge for others. Yet if we dig deeper, we discover that any kind of transformation, and I'm using air quotes here, may be a myth as many industries actually try to get back to some version of a pre-pandemic normal. Plus, our new working arrangements across all industries have exposed a host of inequities across socioeconomic backgrounds. And what does this all mean for students who will soon be entering the workforce? How should we be preparing them, even as we navigate changes in our own workplace? Higher educational environments are also working environments, after all. Joining me for this discussion will be Dr. Cynthia Clark, Professor of Management at Bentley University, Dr. Gwendolyn Combs, Associate Professor of Management, College of Business at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, Dr. Rajagopalan, Dean of the School of Business, and Eugene A. Fallon Jr., Professor of Management at Francis Marion University, and Dr. Rhonda Sharpe, President of Women's Institute for Science, Equity, and Race. We kick off this series, which is sponsored by Sage Publishing, with a discussion about the transformation trap. In other words, why we should be skeptical of new normals in a transformed workplace. So a popular myth is the pandemic is suddenly presenting us with this opportunity for, quote unquote, transforming the workplace, and that we are living in a, quote, new normal. When in fact, I think there is quite a different perspective on that. And I'm wondering what each of you thinks is behind this myth of a transformed workplace. And Rhonda, why don't we start with you on this?
I was hoping you wouldn't start with me, but but that's how it always is, right? Nobody wants to answer the first question.
Right.
So for me, I don't think it's been transformative. I think that we are seeing some temporary shifts, and some will be permanent for some people. In particular, I think folks who are high wage, high skilled, educated workers are going to have more options in terms of the ways that they do their jobs. Folks who are low-skilled workers aren't going to have options. And I like how you asked, you mentioned new normal. I think new normal was the conversation we heard at the beginning of the pandemic. Now people are just wanting to get back to normal. Yeah. And we're seeing conversation, or I should say, we're hearing employers talk more about productivity and how productivity was potentially down because folks were at home. And I just wonder how much of that really was about the flexibility that the employees had in terms of doing their job. And if we think about the fact that schools were closed, that parents, i.e. sometimes that means mothers, had more of a responsibility for childcare and doing the work. So I don't believe it's been transformative. I think that we have seen high-skilled workers have more options in terms of how they do their jobs, but not necessarily low skills. And some of that makes sense, right? A waitress can't necessarily take your order in a restaurant remotely, right?
Yeah.
But
yeah.
we would like to think that even in the notion of transformative, for me, I think that would mean that we, as we talk about folks who are essential, as we talk about or think about what we need to do our daily lives, that everybody who contributes to that, we value in the same way. And during pandemics or other health crises or economic crises, we think about protecting those folks in the same way. And we're just not there.
Mm-hmm. Cynthia, anything you want to add to that?
Yes, I think that Rhonda is right on, and I want to just build on some of the things she said. I have become particularly concerned about the number of women opting out of the workforce because they can't quite possibly be, managing work online and taking care of kids. There was a PBS segment last night with the Secretary of Commerce saying that this will not only put us back about 20 years, but be harmful to the overall economy. And so this has wide-reaching implications. And the question is really, has the workplace been transformed? And I would say yes. Is it transformative? No. And so, for example,
well, in what sense do you mean transformed, perhaps?
For example, I do think the workplace has changed.
Yeah.
And I think COVID made things that we were working on for decades, virtual learning, virtual meetings, reducing our carbon footprint, work from home arrangements. We've been working on those for a long time. And now we've had this massive triggering event, right? Which literally got us online in a week, right? In some senses. And so is it transformed? Yes. Transformative to me means that it's positive. Transformed means it's simply changed. Some things are good, some things are not so good.
Okay. Hari, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I actually agree with both Rhonda and Cynthia, but if you look at it from a kind of a more historical perspective, we've had the big flu pandemic, Spanish flu pandemic in 1918, that was 4 years before it kind of went through. In the mid-century, we had the polio part. And I think there is some literature where they talk about the changing, workplace environment. But when we talk about the change, and I'm a little skeptical about the whole transformative part. I think there's definitely change, and there will be change in the future, but it is going to be contextual. It's going to be contextual on industry. It is going to be on location. So what United States can do, or maybe England can do, people in India are not going to be able to do, and that industry is not going to change. Maybe somebody in South Africa versus in Senegal, it's going to be very different. Because of access to technology. Even in the United States, somebody living in New York versus somebody living in Dillon, South Carolina. We've already seen the inability because of access to technology. So I'm not sure there's going to be a wide sweeping transformation of the workplace environment. Second is, once this pandemic is over, and it's not over, we are still in the middle of it, right? When we started last year, March 15th, we thought end of the year, then it was till we get a vaccine, and now we're still looking at another variant. So if we go back to the flu pandemic, that was 3 to 4 years. And I'm not saying it's going to repeat, but if that's what we are looking at, so the question is it going to change during the pandemic, and then what after? What lessons do we learn after? Because whenever any new technology comes in, you usually have a period of hype, right? And it's going to solve everything, bring in world peace. And then we start seeing the limitations of technology, what it can do and what it cannot do. And there's usually a collapse, there's a crash after that in the usage of technology. And sometimes it's discarded, and then you have the more stable technologies which stay around. And that becomes a supplementary to the normal. It becomes an addition, right? So, for example, I think post-pandemic, we'll definitely have, something like Zoom. This video conferencing is definitely going to be there. But will it actually take away from face-to-face lectures? I'm kind of skeptical there, especially when we're talking about schools and 18-year-olds and 19-year-olds. I'm skeptical. Master's level, maybe that'll be a shift. Again, it depends. It depends on context. So that's why, I think the whole transformation word is kind of, it's too broad. And so it's going to be situational, it's going to be contextual, and very specific in places.
Yeah, I like your contextual idea there. And it kind of speaks to what Rhonda was saying earlier, in the sense that, I could see, like, certain markets or certain industries could see specific benefits coming out of this, but many others won't. Rhonda mentioned the restaurant industry or retail, or other areas, other markets may not be able to reap the same opportunities, I guess, as others.
And if I could just add
Sure.
one more issue, is that even in industries where it is easy to work in a distance away, there have been a lot of concerns about the social glue and the culture that comes in being together in an environment. So even those industries are talking about the need for that to touch base on a regular basis. It may not be an 8 to 5 days a week, but that some need to actually be there face to face in a room sitting together.
Excellent. Okay, Gwendolyn, over to you.
I agree with pretty much everything that's been said, especially with the Hari, with the notion of contextualization or context for change. I also agree that it is not transformative, but there will be change that we are already beginning to see. And some of it will stem from the operation during the pandemic, giving organizations and industries a push or an impetus to try some things out that they were already thinking about. Automation, AI, all those types of things have come into play quite a little bit more extensively, or quite more extensively during the pandemic than previously in terms of industries. I think it will also depend on the culture of the people. Some cultures, I was looking at a McKinsey report that looked at 8 of the larger industrialized countries, and who comprise about 62% of innovation and those types of things. And when you look at those countries, including India, Japan, China, United States, Great Britain, France, and so forth, what individuals in one country, in terms of its culture, its values, how it likes to engage, would allow certain things, whereas in other countries it would not. For example, I was thinking the other night where we've been seeing more and more. I think it's one of the restaurant chains that are using cars to deliver rather than using individuals to use their own cars. So they're automated delivery vehicles. So, I thought to myself, would I enjoy that kind of experience, or, would I want to get my food from a delivery vehicle, or would I want to think that there was some care in that would be probably found more with a person delivering that food? So it depends on how much or to what degree various countries and cultures and industries will attempt to incorporate certain things. I do believe that there are certain things that will continue, not that they're necessarily transformative, but I think that there will be some level of remote work that will continue. Whether that is individuals, depending upon their job or their responsibilities, are allowed to work totally remote, or whether there would be some hybrid type of situation where you'd work part of the week at home or some other place, and then the other parts of the week you would be face to face in the office. I'm already seeing some of that here and with other people that I talk to in other organizations, where that hybrid situation is becoming, pretty key and pretty consistently requested by employees, and also being agreed to by employers. Now, the massive, where total organizations will go remote, I know that has occurred also, where certain field offices have totally gone remote, where everybody, including the secretary and everybody else, is working remotely. Now, that does create some inequity, because what happens to those persons who had the responsibility for maintaining that building, maintaining that space? So those persons are totally, out of work, and their ability to find work will depend upon where they're located as well. Also, as I said, some of the automation types of things, the use of robotics. Robotics is not new, but the use of robotics in other areas, in other industries, in other industry types, organizational types, has been experimented with during COVID, and I think some of that will remain, where some of the small areas of work, specific areas of work, will be operated or will be done more with that type of innovation and automation in terms of the industry. But transformative to me means that there's an opportunity for dialogue across everyone who is involved in the situation, where issues are discussed openly and honestly. Opinions of individuals are considered in decision making of the organization, and I really have not seen that, where that type of dialogue and voice given to employees has really occurred in a large context. Some organizations are doing it, some institutions, higher ed, are doing it, but in a large context where you can say that things have been transformative, and meaning that the work environment is taking on this gigantic change, this gigantic movement to do things differently. I can't say that we are being transformative like everyone else has said.
Okay.
Change, yes.
Right. Excellent. You just heard from Dr. Cynthia Clark, Professor of Management at Bentley University, Dr. Gwendolyn Combs, Associate Professor of Management, College of Business at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, Dr. Hari Rajagopalan, Dean of the School of Business, and Eugene A. Fallon, Junior Professor of Management at Francis Marion University, and Dr. Rhonda Sharpe, President of the Women's Institute for Science, Equity, and Race. Sage Publishing is the sponsor of this 4-part series of The Authority File. Join us next week when we continue our conversation and talk about some of the actual positive changes in the workforce, how we can sustain them, and how we can help students identify employers who are driving authentic, meaningful change in the midst of major social movements and a pandemic.
It's important for students to know that diversity, equity, and inclusion is being considered in most organizations that they would engage, that they would go interview with, or be hired to work in. So it makes them be more savvy, more intellectually prepared, if the institution is doing things, and to allow students to know that this is now a major part in many industries of the work environment that you will be entering. So to go in and be, not knowledgeable about it, knowing what diversity means, knowing some of the concepts, that puts the students at a disadvantage.
If you like what you hear, rate us or give us a review on your podcast platform of choice. As always, sponsorship and advertising for the Authority File podcast are handled by Choice's advertising manager, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced by Choice's senior digital media producer, Mark Dirks, and digital media assistant, Sabrina Kofer. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.